Okay, Clark Amadon, thank you. There was a dam right here, right?
There was a dam there.
And
yes.
did it have a name?
Well, not really. It's sort of Coxbrook Dam. Most of the people called it around here.
And when was it built?
Oh, the dam was built in the late 20s.
So, and it was taken down when?
Oh gosh, I think the project was 2007, I believe, about 7 years ago.
And why?
Well, one of the things that I do as a volunteer is work within the organization called Trout Unlimited, and it's an organization that is very concerned with cold water conservation. One of the issues with making sure that cold water continues to flow is that we need connected systems, and whenever you have a dam or an impoundment in a stream or a river, you have a disconnected system. This particular project was suggested to us by regional fisheries biologist Rich Kern.
Oh, right.
And Rich suggested that by taking out this dam, we're going to be able to connect this system, and there are wild trout in the Dog River just a little ways below this, and the wild trout, specifically the rainbows, are going to have more access to spawning habitat if they're able to use this particular tributary. So that's why we wanted to take out the dam. We wanted to reconnect the system. We wanted to get the materials flowing in the river, not only the water, but everything else that water transports, but also have access to a significant amount of spawning habitat that wasn't available to the wild trout in the Dog. And the Dog hasn't been stocked for decades. And it's managed as a wild trout fishery, one of the few in the state. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to connect this system back up. And also, the landowner here, the dam owner, was very concerned with his property. And if the dam was to have a sudden failure in a high water event, in the springtime when there's a warm day or maybe rains on top of that, he was very concerned that a catastrophic dam failure would also have obviously significant consequences for a house that's immediately downstream.
Oh, right. He could be flooded.
So,
he could
exactly,
be swept away there.
Exactly.
Right.
So by taking out the dam in a controlled manner, by opening up the reach here, it allows the river to flow. It allows it to act more like it's supposed to be acting. And dams and rivers are inherently disconnecting in terms of their properties and keep the rivers from transporting the materials that they need to transport.
So a purpose of the dam was to improve the fishery.
Well, improve the fishery, but also more importantly for us, it's really a habitat improvement, because if you have good habitat, if you take care of the river, you take care of the habitat, then the fish will take care of themselves. So that's one of the things that we tend to focus on, is really habitat improvement. And even though we love to fish, and that's part of what we believe in terms of our sport and recreation, we know that if we take care of the habitat in the river, then the fish will take care of themselves. And also, in light of the legislation that's being proposed this year in terms of dam safety, it's also a really good illustration of, by being aware of what dams do and don't do, we also are able to protect infrastructure and also protect private property as well.
Okay, what do dams do and what do dams don't do?
Well, dams that are serving a purpose these days tend to produce hydropower. That's
right.
About in terms of having useful dams. Dams can be aesthetically pleasing. They can be historically important to certain people in certain locations. So dams can be aesthetically pleasing, and they can produce power.
Right.
If you take a look at the probably 400 some odd dams that are registered with the Department of Environmental Conservation in Vermont, that there's a lot of dams that are not serving a purpose at this point and are pretty useless. No one's using dams anymore to produce, to saw logs and to run grist mills. They're largely there to produce power. So, and like I said, they can be aesthetically pleasing, but they are often a hazard to people downstream, and they also are disconnecting systems that, by keeping those systems open and allowing the rivers and the streams to flow naturally, they create meanders, they transport materials, and you don't tend to get a lot of materials getting held up by dams and possibly creating catastrophic releases by by creating situations where dams might fail.
So in a sense, the fewer the dams there are, the more connected the river systems are.
Exactly.
And the more connected the river systems are, the more natural they are, and presumably the better for the fish.
Well, they're better for the fish and the habitat, but they're also safer as well. If you're removing dams from systems and you're doing it in a way that is appropriate for the infrastructure and the personal property that's there, it will tend to protect the infrastructure and the personal property. And yes, for us, in terms of rivers that are cold water systems like this one, it also is opening up significant amounts of spawning habitat, but it's also allowing the river to do what it needs to do.
And what does the river do?
Well, the river, it obviously transports a lot of water.
Right.
And if you look at it closely, it's transporting a lot of sediment right now too. And it also will transport woody debris. And that woody debris is also important for fisheries in terms of having healthy fisheries. Woody debris, and there's some woody debris that's collecting on the side of the bank here, and woody debris allows insect life, allows protection for small fish, and it's a place where larger fish will go and feed and also have refuge. So, and dams sometimes will collect that material in one spot rather than allowing it to distribute itself throughout the system.
Now, this is not the only dam that's been taken down over the last several years.
Oh no, in fact, dam removal is a process and an action that's being taken regularly throughout the state of Vermont and around New England and across the country as well. There's been a significant dam that's been taken out on the Battenkill, it's the so-called Dufresne Dam.
Right.
And also on the Wells River last year, there was a small dam taken out across from the town garage in Groton. And one of the things I want to point out in this dam removal as well is that whether the dam is owned by a municipality or a corporation or a private individual and they're seeking to have some removal happen, that none of the dam removals that I'm aware of that have happened within the state of Vermont have cost the dam owner a dime. It's been paid through a combination of mostly public sources through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, through the state of Vermont, and also through a lot of volunteer efforts through organizations like Trout Unlimited and friends and river groups around the state, as well as some private donations. So people who might be considering a project and are concerned, well, gee whiz, you know, I understand the reason to take out a dam, but I don't really have any resources to do that myself. I can tell you that most likely there'll be a lot of folks that will be aligning behind the project, and the project probably will be able to happen with little or no monetary
So these folks
outlay.
didn't have to pay for this?
No, none whatsoever.
Are there any particular dams that are on your agenda to get removed over the next few years?
Well, I think one of the things that we're really anxious about in terms of the dam safety legislation is creating an opportunity for us to have another dam safety engineer out there to be able to assess the dams that the inventory that we have in Vermont, and if there are some dams that the owners of dams become more aware of, and they see that they're a hazard and they see that they're crumbling and really not serving a purpose, then we're willing to take on any one of those particular projects.
But like right now, even on some of the major rivers, is there a particular dam, or are there a few dams that people like you look and say this dam is really doing some harm to the natural world, to the fish habitat?
Well, and if you ask it that way, if you take a look at any dam, whether it's an ongoing, a money-making hydropower plant, whether it be on the Newsguy or the Connecticut River or any other river in the state of Vermont, those dams inherently disconnect systems.
Right.
So from one perspective, you may say that any one of those dams might come out and it would do the river and the system a good thing. Whether or not it's practical to think that those dams can be taken out, that's in terms of what's going on with awareness of where our power comes from, there would probably be relatively little support for doing that.
Right.
But by and large, dams disconnect systems. And the other thing to remember in Vermont anyway is that the citizens in Vermont own the water. I mean, this is public water that's coming down through it. This is not, the bottom of the river is not owned by landowners. We have a right to access public water in the state of Vermont. And when companies have dammed rivers in the state of Vermont, they're using a public resource for private gain. And yes, we do, all of us gain to a certain extent some power from hydro, but it is, but these waters are a public resource.